Good evening and welcome. Charlie, how are we doing?
Doing great.
This is episode 6. I'm almost having to keep track of how many episodes we're on, Charlie, of talking Florida rugby occasionally, which I think is the #1 Florida rugby podcast, is it not?
Absolutely. And has been.
It's the only Florida rugby podcast in history.
Yeah.
And thus, we are #1. My name is Ross Davenport, referee, fatback, man with more jobs than Indeed.com, and the home color voice of Rugby ATL. You can follow me on Twitter at @ThatRossBloke. As always, as you can see next to me here on the screen, I'm joined by my esteemed producer and cohort in this little adventure of ours, the guru of RugbyFL.com, the best local rugby site in the United States, Charlie Velasquez. Charlie, how is your July 4th weekend going?
Oh, it was calm. You know, we just kept it, inside. No, nothing crazy.
Nothing too crazy. No massive parties at the beach in the water and jumping off and on boats and nothing like that.
Not a good time for that.
I mean, you're looking at your hair. You are of that danger age over the age of 75. I'm just kidding, obviously, Charlie. It's a running joke between Charlie and I, which we won't get to tonight. I think we've mentioned it before on the podcast. But obviously, being July 4th, we have a special guest on our podcast this evening, a USA Eagle, only appropriately on July 4th weekend. We'll get to that individual in a second. But first, we need to thank our sponsor for talking Florida rugby occasionally. That would be Chris Ream, the life insurance guy. And instead of me talking about him, how about he talks a little bit about himself, Charlie?
Yeah, because he likes to talk. So
he does like to talk. He has his own little podcast as well, which is all about life insurance. He's a referee. Of course, all those referees love to talk. So let's hear from Chris himself here before we get to our special guest this evening.
Okay, and special thanks to Chris as usual, because he's been
always big supporter of RugbyFL.com.
Not only on the podcast, but way before. So here's Chris, in his own words, trying to do his thing.
Hello, I'm Chris Ream. If you've been around rugby in Florida for any time at all, you probably know me because I've been a referee for 35 years here. I'm a life insurance guy, and if you want coverage for your family, the thing you need to know is that not all policies are created equal. Right now, during the COVID, we can get policies issued without a medical exam and do it all online. And Penn Mutual is the best carrier at that. Of course, they're the ones that have been sponsoring rugby for the last 5 years. So if you have any questions about life insurance, if you'd like me to review your existing coverage, please reach out. I look forward to speaking with you.
Very good.
Thank you, Chris. And as Chris, as you saw on the screen there, you can visit Chris at lifeinsuranceguy.com, or you can call him at the office 954-239-7344. Now let's get to our 3 quick things. Now, Chris, leading in nicely to our first quick thing we're going to talk about here. He actually mentioned this to me last week. If you're on Facebook, there's now a recent group being formed called the Rugby Job Board. Actually has nearly 2,000 members. Chris, I actually spoke to Chris earlier this week, and he mentioned he's going to be hiring a person from the Rugby Job Board. So when he suggested to me what an awesome opportunity this might be for some of our viewers and listeners that may be struggling on the employment side of things, during this COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're on Facebook, search for Rugby Job Board, and you can pretty quickly join that group. You've got to answer a few questions about yourself, and then you can post jobs or you can post resumes. Questions to the group, etc. I was on there today just looking at some of the great discussions going on there. I know they're having some video Zoom meetings, and we all know what a tight-knit community rugby is. And I know we've obviously heard stories of rugby people hiring rugby people. So get on that job board. By the way, Charlie, you don't know this, but I'm going to post a job for a new producer tomorrow in this group as your salary demands, which is getting a little ridiculous at this point.
Coincidentally, I was going to post for a new, host. So what happened?
Obviously, I'm just kidding. Charlie has this job for life, or well, as long as we continue to do this thing. And well, when I say job, I should say volunteer opportunity. So yeah, if you're on Facebook, search for Rugby Job Board and get on there.
What I am going to look into is creating something similar, but just for Florida, because as great as it is, of course, I mean, a job in Utah doesn't really suit people from Miami. So maybe I'll get it going, because I already have a lot of people on my Facebook, and that could be something. Yeah,
it'll be a lot more useful than these chuggers groups that we've seen sort of explode during this pandemic across the social media universe. I've seen some very depressing things on those videos. Fun things, but depressing as well. But speaking of depressing, let's get on to number 2, the number 2 part of our quick things sandwich here. The World Rugby officially canceled the 7 series earlier this week, which left New Zealand as the title winners in both the men's and the women's sides. Obviously, disappointing news, but I think we all saw this coming with the current situation. The New Zealand women, they won 4 of the 5 events that they actually managed to get in, so well-deserved for them. USA finished 5th after winning the opening tournament in Glendale, but then slipped down the rankings a little bit. They only finished 8th in Sydney at the end, but obviously coming off 2nd place, finished the season before, just like the men. So things looking pretty positive for the Sevens. Obviously, a lot of things going on off the field that may have impacted the finishes of both the men's and the women's teams. The men finished 7th in their standings. Unfortunately, didn't reach a final in any of the 6 events. It obviously, except winning the USA title, it was in Sydney, and then reached the semifinal once in Sydney, and then obviously that's coming off a 2nd place finish in. Obviously, we didn't get to do Vegas this year, I should say, but it was in LA this year. They didn't win that one. They won in Vegas last year. Of course, I'm getting myself all mixed up now. But yeah, disappointing to see that finishing, but obviously it was pretty much something we saw coming. And then the third thing I was going to mention is the start of Super Rugby Australia, which started this past weekend. Charlie, did you get to watch any of the games?
Well, no, I didn't. It's starting this weekend, this coming weekend.
No, Rugby Australia just started this weekend. I watched Reds Waratahs on Friday.
I missed it.
Not live, obviously, because it was on at some ridiculous time in the morning. But
I watched the New Zealand games.
You watched some. Yeah, there was a total of 4 games to watch this weekend: 2 in Australia and 2 in New Zealand. So if you have ESPN Plus, you can go back and watch those on replay, and definitely worth watching. But one of the biggest things as a referee that I enjoyed in Rugby Australia was the implementation of a test law they're doing, where if you kick from inside your own half and it bounces inside the opponent's 22 and goes into touch, you get the throw in. Now, I think in the Reds Waratahs game, if I remember correctly, it only happened once, and the referee remembered it and the players remembered it. It's going to be an interesting law. I'm not sure whether it'll affect kicking as much as it may affect defense and teams spreading out to stop this count. Teams that are going to try and take advantage of this new law, and we'll see exactly how much things open up if they do install it as a law around the world. Obviously, just now on trial in Australia, so just keep an eye on that over the next few weeks. As a man who loves to kick the rugby ball, Charlie, what do you think of this new law?
I sort of like this law. I sort of like it, yeah. And it will, if used properly, I guess it'll give advantage to the team that is attacking and make the game more exciting, right?
It will. I mean, hopefully it doesn't lead to more kicking. I think we have enough kicking in the game. I think it will lead to perhaps more tactical kicking.
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea is to spread the defense out a little more and promote more running and space to do such things. So we'll see how that goes over the next few weeks in Australia. There are plenty of fans in the stands there, but they're still social distancing in Australia, so they were separated in pockets, unlike the New Zealanders that were 30,000+ strong for that Highlanders Crusaders game, which unfortunately my Highlanders lost in a tight one. I won't mention the refereeing in that game, but there was a few forward passes that he might have missed. But anyway, enough about that. Let's get to our first guest. We have 2 this evening, both not related to each other in a relation sense, but one being a player and one being her former coach. But this outstanding rugby player was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, former home of the CRCs. Hopefully we get the CRCs going back there down the road here. But she only picked up a rugby ball when she started college up at UCF for me in Orlando. Down for most people. Now a Sevens and 15s Eagles star. She's come a long way from 2011 at UCF in this great sport, but still has plenty more to accomplish in her career. Let's welcome Kris Thomas. Kris, thanks for joining us on Talking Florida Rugby.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today.
Now, do you prefer Kris or Kristen? I've seen it in both places, and in one video it goes from Kris to Kristen, or do you really care?
I don't really have a preference, but I guess Kris is shorter. Well,
yeah, I was going to say Kris is 1 syllable versus 2, so we'll stick with that one for now. But again, thanks for joining us. Kris is out in San Diego, where she's hopefully soon getting ready to start picking up a rugby ball and having some contact. Just obviously relegated to just fitness at the moment with the COVID-19 situation. But let's get to the start of things with your rugby career. Talk to us about how you ended up at UCF in the first place. Obviously, coming from Philadelphia to UCF. Obviously, there's reasons you come to Florida, but how did you particularly end up at UCF? And talk about how you got into rugby there.
Gotcha. I ended up at UCF because they have a really good theater program, and that's what I was pursuing in college. So I had only applied to 2 schools. I had applied to Penn State, Maine, and also UCF. And I got into both, but UCF offered me an academic scholarship. So that was kind of like the deciding factor of what brought me down to Orlando. And then as far as rugby goes, when I was in high school, my senior year, I dated a rugby player. I tried to sign up for it when I was in high school, but it was a bit much because, the teams practice so late at night and then having transportation to and from the practices. So I just decided to wait until college. So literally like the first week of school, the UCF clubs had like this huge fair, and I just signed up for rugby then, and then just started showing up to practice.
Awesome. So you did have some idea on what rugby was before coming to UCF, and I'm sure the rugby club there was thrilled to have someone. Normally back then, especially when high school girls rugby wasn't as prevalent as it is now, it was probably tough to find girls that knew what rugby was. So that must have been awesome for them. But what really drew you to the sport? You said you dated a rugby player, but obviously if you didn't like rugby, you said, okay, but what really drew you? I know you were an athlete that played basketball and ran track and field, but what really drew you to wanting to play rugby?
I honestly, though I dated a rugby player, I didn't really know much about the sport besides the fact that it was full contact. But I was honestly just bored running track and playing basketball, and I just kind of signed up for it without knowing much.
Right.
If I'm being honest, like I just kind of showed up, and then once I was in it, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like it has a fast pace. Like you get to run around, you get to tackle. Like that's kind of why I stuck around. But initially, I didn't know too much.
But obviously being a natural athlete, that definitely helped. And I'm sure Raoul, once he saw you pick up a ball and saw the natural athleticism and the speed that you had, he was happy to have you. And were you good at it initially and right away, or did it take you a little bit to really sort of get into the sport?
It took me a little while on the contact elements. Like I think running with the ball was really natural for me, but like rucking for the first time was like kind of strange.
It's hard for everybody.
Like
new, I think.
In the 15s game, like if it had been sevens, maybe a little bit, like less people in the ruck, but going into 15s rucking, that was an experience. So yeah, I guess 50-50. Like running was natural, but the contact elements I really had to work at.
And obviously, unlike football, there's no stopping and starting. In football, you get tackled and we stop for a minute. And it's rugby. I got to get back up again and find my teammates and get back and look for support again. Now, obviously, you've ended up as a USA Eagle. That doesn't happen right away. So how did your sort of rise up the rugby ladder go from UCF? How did that come about?
It wasn't linear. I had gone to my first season playing. I had gone to a U20 camp. And I was fast, but I wasn't really good, so I didn't really get invited back after that. So they're just like, no, thank you. But then after that, I had gone to like a year and a half later. I think I had like a lot more experience under my belt, and I went to a U23 camp, and I was just a lot better. It was like the experience was like night and day. Like I actually enjoyed it. I had a good time. And then I got invited to scrimmage the Amazons with the U23s. And this had happened because we made it to C16 International with UCF, and I had gotten scouted there for the U23 team. After that, we toured France in November, and that's when I got an invite to a national sevens team camp because the U23 coaches had sent my information to the national sevens team head coach. From that point on, I went to a series of camps. So pretty much when you get into before you're in the player pool for sevens, you go to camps, and it's basically like you fly out and to San Diego for an entire week. You train with the team, X, Y, and Z. It's a little bit different now, but when I was coming through, you would literally just train with all the residents full time as if you were on the team. Right. So I went to about 5 of those week-long camps throughout my collegiate career, and then eventually I was offered a full-time contract in January of 2015, and I just moved out to San Diego and started training there.
Now, do you remember the first time? Obviously, your first experience at rugby was 15s. Do you remember the first time you played sevens? Do you think that was really for you, and did you like it more than 15s at that point?
No, I initially liked 15s more. I definitely had to work on my fitness a lot for sevens. And I think once I got my fitness down, I enjoyed the game a lot more.
Yeah, a lot more space, obviously, for someone like you with serious wheels to sort of find. You're not running into, back rows every 2 minutes.
Right.
That's all.
Right, yeah.
Now, obviously, having a coach like Raoul Besse, who we'll talk to a little bit, he obviously saw what you had in yourself, because you obviously can't just go and drive up to any USA Rugby camp. He obviously suggested you, and perhaps sent video of you. So it's great to have a coach, supportive of him, that realizes that the the higher level of rugby you're playing, the better off everybody's going to be. I hope all Florida coaches watching this tonight understand that, get your players to the most exposure they can, even if it's, up in Atlanta, send your kids to play the highest level of rugby they can. Hopefully, I think we talked about in the previous episode that, with the COVID situation and perhaps loss of national championships, the representative rugby, which you got to play, obviously at the USA level, there wasn't really a South team, I don't think, at that point for women, or if there was, it wasn't anything particularly serious. I'm really hoping that the COVID gets the representative sides back going again, and which would open up a lot more opportunities for players everywhere.
Right.
Now, do you remember the moment you realized you were really good at rugby? Was it in that freshman year, or obviously you said it took you a little while to get used to the contact? When did you sort of realize, oh, I could be really good at this? Or was it one of those first camps you went to when you really had it going?
I think it was the under 23 camps that I got like a lot of good feedback from the coaches, and they were like giving me different programs and skills to work on. So I think that's when I really realized, and I started taking it like a lot more seriously.
Right.
When I first started playing rugby, I was like working 3 jobs, working overnight. So it was a little bit tougher for me to make practices and do X, Y, and Z. But like once I realized, oh, this is like a big thing, I should really pursue this. And I started like really, dialing back the working and trying to prioritize like my rugby and my training and my fitness.
Awesome. Now, obviously you started playing 15s, then got into 7s. What do you dislike most about each? And do you think you're better than one or the other? Do you enjoy one more than the other? Obviously, 7s perhaps got you, 15s got you looked at initially for things. And then when you went and played 7s, and then now the 15s came back to look at you on the Eagles side of things. So yeah, compare the two for me.
15s and 7s. I think for my position, I think 7s is a little more exciting, just because when I play 15s, I'm playing on the wing. So it's just like a lot,
right.
There's less action. But what I do think is cool is like when 7s, when you score, it's like, yes, you're doing something dynamic and you're like beating someone into space. But I feel like when you score in 15s, you beat like 8 people. So it's like,
right.
It's like a little, I don't want to say more exciting, but it's like really like, I don't know, it is really exciting to score in 15s because you've like gone through so many people. But I will say I personally enjoy 7s more just because it's a little more dynamic, and I just get more action in those 14 minutes than I do like in a 15s game. But 15s has its cool parts. Like I like the kicking game, which we do a lot more than when I'm playing 7s. And then what else? I know 7s has strategy, but I do like enjoy the like kicking strategies of 15s as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the best tries in 7s do seem to be the individual ones where we've seen you score some, you take it 50 meters. But then the best tries in 15s, as you said, involve your entire team and perhaps 20 to 25 passes and everybody getting involved. I almost think they're two different sports. I don't like to say that, but they are almost two different sports and take two very different skill sets, especially on the coaching side of things, I'm sure. One thing I was going to ask you, 15s versus 7s on the USA Eagles side of things, how does that work for you? With 7s versus 15s, are you required to be with the 7s just for a certain period of time and then you're available for 15s, or can you sort of say I want to do this and don't want to do that? How does that work for you with your contract situation, and obviously being under contract with 7s but playing 15s as well?
Gotcha. Since I am contracted to play 7s, that is like my full-time job / career. Right. Whereas 15s, when they have assemblies, if we're not within the 7 season, like for instance, last summer I played in the Super Series because the 7s team was no longer in season, so I got permission to play 15s. And then this upcoming year is a bit different now too. Like what we were planning was to have the Olympics 2020 and then World Cup 2021. So I would kind of switch gears after that. This season, what we're trying to do is, like still prioritize 7s because we are still training for an Olympics, but we're going to see if it's possible to have some of those 7s players, go play 15s after the Olympics. So it'll be a little different. We won't be competing in like the test matches in the lead up until our season is over, but we are actively engaging in like team meetings, film watching, like really engaging with our teammates so that we can like, be tuned into all the information and all the things that we need to do if we are able to do the Olympics and the World Cup.
Gotcha. And I'll get into sort of your preparation. I had a question from Ronnie Suarez, who's one of our he's actually the coach, men's coach at FIU, and also going to be at the Coast Guard and coaches our Elite 7 sides. What's it like being coached by Brownie? He's obviously talking about Chris Brown, the head coach of the women's national sevens team.
Oh, he's awesome. I love it. I think when he came in, he really prioritized like our team culture. So him, like Brownie, along as well as like our other coaching staff and our high performance staff, like they really wanted to make sure like, yes, you guys play well together on the field, but we also want to make sure that everyone is like everything is cohesive off the field as well, that everyone is in like a training environment that's safe, healthy, everyone feels like they belong here and they're doing their best. So I think that was pretty cool. So when he came in, we did like lots of meetings, what we call like brave meetings, that are just really working on that team culture aspect. And then also like his coaching, like he's always implementing new things that we try, and we like, you know, he's real with us. Like when we mess up, he'll tell us, you know, he'll make sure that he's always giving us like constructive feedback so that we can get better and that the team can grow together. So it's just, yeah, I have nothing but good things.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky on the USA Eagles 7 side of things with Brownie and obviously Mike Friday as well. On the men's side of things, they've taken them, taken you guys to the next level. Before all this COVID, can you take us through sort of a typical week for you when you're home? Let's say when you are in 7 season, obviously maybe when you're not going to a tournament, but can you take us through a week for you on a rugby side of things, and obviously on a personal life side of things as well? Just a typical week for you training wise and things like that.
We typically train Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday and Friday, and then we'll have meetings on Wednesdays. So we're fortunate enough to be at a training facility where we can train, we can lift, and we can also eat there because there's a dining hall. So we'll get there around like 7 or 8, and we'll eat breakfast. We'll go to taping. We'll do any like prehab things that we need to, be ready for the session. On Mondays, we'll typically have one training, and then we'll lift, and then we'll have another training. On Tuesdays, we'll have one training and one lift, and then Wednesdays we're off physically, but we'll have meetings, and then that's where we do like a lot of our culture meetings. Thursday is the same as Tuesday, one training, one lift, and then switch that. Thursday has 2 trainings and 1 lift, and then Friday has 1 training and a lift. So that's a typical week for us. In the between that though, we'll have meetings. We'll have what we call like a practice preview where we'll all go out to the board and the TV and see what we're about to do, or review things that we had done in previous practices that we want to either continue or work on. Yeah, that's pretty much our weekly schedule. We have Saturdays off, and then I usually do like a bike ride or like yoga or a stretch on Sundays, and then back at it on Monday.
Awesome. When do you normally leave for tournaments? On a Thursday, I would assume, because I know some of yours are 2 days, some are 1 day, some are obviously a lot closer than others. But
It depends.
When do you normally leave?
Depends on the tournament. It depends on how steep of a time change we're having. So there's no like set day. It just depends on like how far we're going.
Right. And how many full-time professionals do they have on the sevens squad? I know there's sort of an outside squad as well.
When we ended the season, I think 24.
Okay,
around
so
that
24,
number.
And then how many of you travel normally? 15 or so?
No, we usually travel with just the 12. Sometimes if it's a back-to-back tournament, sometimes we'll take 13.
I had a question from my wife. Obviously, you're based in San Diego now. Are all of you? Do you know if all of you are going to be moving to Glendale? Obviously, with this new USA Rugby partnership, with the national team is going to be based out there. Or is it just 15s that are going to be based out of Glendale? I'm not sure.
That's 15s. For sevens,
so sevens are going to stay in San Diego.
San Diego. Mm-hmm.
Not a bad spot to be year round, I would say.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Now, let's go back to 15s now. You obviously got an amazing experience of going over to Ireland for the last World Cup in 2017. Just give us a brief overview of that experience, rugby-wise and culture-wise, being in Ireland, one of the great rugby countries in the world.
Yeah, it was amazing. We had I guess when we first got there, like we did like the whole opening ceremony, which was amazing because we got to experience like some of the like cultural aspects of Ireland, and then just being in the different cities, it was really cool because we just learned so much history. And then also like everyone we met was just really friendly. Like they were just so excited to have us there. So it was a good experience from like beginning to end. Like I loved everything about it. Like with just the sightseeing, the people we met, of games. Like it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's one of the best parts of of rugby is just the global aspect of it and the amazing. What are some of the other most famous places, some of your favorite places that you've got to visit as a rugby player?
Dubai is pretty cool. Australia, we go to Sydney every year, so that's cool. We went to Cape Town for the first time this year. That was amazing. I think those are my top three. Yeah, Dubai, Sydney, and Cape Town.
Obviously, next year we've got a bit of a mess now. Obviously, next year with the Olympics and the World Cup, do you sort of know what you're going to be focused on specifically, or are you just kind of waiting to see how it all plays out with obviously those two happening both next year?
I'm going to focus on sevens mostly, just because we have we have the Olympics and then we have like our full seven season.
Your series, yeah.
Hopefully full seven season.
Yes.
And then I will be engaging with the 15s team, and I will be in the loop on everything. But the focus right this minute will be sevens, and then like once the Olympics end, then it'll kind of switch to 15s.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of rugby, but I mean, what an amazing year it would be next year if you could combine all of those things. I have a question from Chris Vassell here, one of our Boca Raton coaches and former life player. What's been your most memorable tournament? Maybe just, in general atmosphere-wise and just success-wise for you so far, the one that sticks out for you in your mind?
That would be the Ritz from last season. It was amazing. I had personally been on the team for 4 years, and we had come really close, but never won a tournament. So to have like that first win and be a part of like the first USA women's team to like win a sevens tournament was a pretty special moment. So I'll have to go with the Ritz on this one.
Awesome. Another awesome rugby country. Now, speaking of countries, you've played with players from all over around this country. I asked Alex Tucci and Cam Dolan this question when I spoke to them a few weeks ago. What's the sort of view of Florida rugby from outside our state? Some of us get to experience rugby outside the state, and many Floridians just play here and don't get to experience that. How is Florida? When people say, when you ask you where you're from, and you say, "Oh, well, I played rugby in Florida," what do people sort of think about Florida rugby? I think it's an up-and-coming state, where you can obviously play rugby year-round, but it's still yet to really, put a real dent on the national side of things. Except, every now and again, obviously UCF men, winning a couple of national titles as well as some club sides. But what's the sort of view of Florida rugby that you've seen?
I don't really know much of the perception of Florida rugby right now, but I feel like of the South in general, I think it's of like known as a place that produces a lot of rugby talent. And then kind of, as you said, like you have like a few teams that have shown that it's like up and coming. Whereas I think if I was like, I've been out of college for so long at this point, so I don't really know like much of the perception of like even the Florida college scene. But that's all I have is like the overall general view of like the Southeast.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously with ATL and NOLA having very successful MLR teams so far, and life as well, the likes of Arkansas State and all these teams all seem to have sort of Florida guys and girls playing for their teams, and I think we kind of do it quietly, as I said to Raoul, before the show. Florida, we do it in bits and pieces with individuals like yourself and Courtney Kuehl and a lot of these other players that have got to the national stage, but have done it quietly. And it's we're not like North and Southern Cal and Utah and the Northeast, where considered real rugby hotbeds. But we're doing it all right down here. Now I asked you, who's the best player you ever played with? You can also go, if you want to, with who's the best player you've ever played against. I mentioned Aliv Kelter because I knew a little bit about her and her name, but I didn't realize she represented USA at youth level in soccer and ice hockey, and now she plays for the 7s and 15 sides, which is an amazing accomplishment for an athlete. But who's the best player you've ever played with or against, or both perhaps?
That's a tough question. I guess like for you guys that aren't on the team, like you guys see like glimpses of what we do on the field, whereas like as someone who trains with my teammates like day in and day out, like I'm just like thoroughly impressed with what like different individuals do on the field. So it's just like such a tough question for me to answer, just because like I see just what so many different people do, and like someone could be the best in this aspect versus like another aspect. But you did mention Alev, and she is like a really talented athlete, and then like all the things that she's done before then, like I'm just really impressed with like all of the different national teams that she's represented. Yeah, that's a tough one.
No worries. I mean, I feel for Alif's parents, just what they had to do for her as a youth and travel around to soccer camps and ice hockey camps, and then now obviously she's taken rugby to the next level, which is amazing. I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, but the first one I watch, Charlie's going to play a video for us here, which was a really awesome video you did for Uninterrupted, which is the athlete empowerment brand founded by LeBron James, for those of you that don't know, and his business manager, Maverick Carter, which was a question that they asked you and said, what would you say, to your younger self? What would you say to the young Kris? And let's see if Charlie can pull it up here.
Dear 15-year-old Kris, one day you won't feel so suppressed by gender norms, and you won't have to change your clothes after you leave the house, and you won't have to lie about who you love or who you're going to see. Because little by little, you'll start expressing yourself, the truest version of yourself, and it'll mold you into this person that just emanates confidence. And you're going to meet people along the way, and those people are going to be so authentically themselves that you'll feel empowered today to go out there and be the truest version of yourself. You'll be all right. Actually, you'll scratch that. You'll be better than I. You're gonna thrive.
Yeah, that's an awesome video, especially in this day and age. And I think rugby, being one of those sports that really invites everybody to come and play, shape, size, color, sexual orientation, is an amazing sport for that reason. And what would you say, I think, to a young girl in Florida, perhaps, that's just started playing rugby and isn't sure of herself and, looking for her role in this sport, and talk about what it's meant to you over your lifetime?
I would say to just, have confidence in what you can do and just back yourself. I think we just need to go out in there and just show what we can do. I think sometimes people get caught up in trying to if you're looking to get into the higher levels of rugby to impress a coach or anything, but they're really going to be impressed by seeing what you do naturally and seeing how you just have that confidence in the field to just go out there and wreck stuff. So I would say that, and then just enjoy the process, and enjoy the games. You never, even during this COVID time, you never know when you're going to be able to play the sport again. So It's just really important to just go out there. You started playing because you like the sport, and you started playing because you want to have fun and you enjoy being with your teammates. So I think hold on to that enjoyment, hold on to that fun. And then my experience with it has just been rugby for me has just given me so much confidence. I think sometimes I was just really I am still kind of this in person, but just a little more on the timid side. I'm kind of quiet, but I think on the field, I'm just so confident. It just it took a lot for me working on my confidence off the field, and I think the sport really helped with that. And I just met so many cool people, and a lot of my best friends play rugby, and I'm just so very fortunate that this game has given me some of the coolest people in my life. So that's kind of how this journey has been for me.
Awesome. Yeah, girls rugby is picking up in Florida. We're still struggling to get full teams involved, but I know at least a couple of girls that have got full rides to scholarships to universities outside of the state this past year, and it's just going to be more and more with the amount of athletic talent down here in the state of Florida. So hopefully we continue to see the rise of girls and women's rugby in Florida. All right, let's bring in your college coach. As we do that, talk about, I think everybody has their sort of memory of the first time they met Raoul. Whether it was as a coach, yeah, you saw him roll his eyes there. But do you remember meeting him the first time, or just sort of your initial experiences with Raoul?
I think he was nice to me the first day. I think he was pretty cool the first day. But no, I just remember him being I don't know, just saying welcome to the team. And then I don't think we talked that much on my first time coming out, but then
right.
We got to know each other a little bit down the line. But yeah, he was super cool on the first day of practice.
And how would you describe him as a coach? I've seen him on the sidelines, so I know a little bit of his personality. I would say intense is the word that I think of, but obviously he's had an amazing amount of success, in Orlando with UCF and Orlando women back in the day as well. But how would you describe him as a coach?
Yeah, he is intense. I'll be nice. Now he's definitely like a tough coach, but you know that it's because like he wants us to be the best and he wants us to win. And he also like you can tell that he cares about us. Like he would always invite us to his house and cook for us and this and that. Like it was cool playing for Raoul, but he was really tough on us, and like we needed it, and you could tell the success is proven. But yeah.
Yeah, Raoul is one of those guys. He just gets rugby and he understands what it takes to be part of that rugby culture. Raoul, well, we're going to do an episode on your own down the road here, but tell us a little bit about your rugby background, just so those that are watching that don't know you can get to know you a little bit.
I started playing in 1978 for Orlando, and then I started at wing, and then I moved to flanker, and then I just played for the ERU in the South, and played some sevens for Atlantis and various places, and got lucky and got to travel the world. I think I played rugby in 28 countries in the world. And then I was coaching Orlando men, and my father got ill, and I couldn't coach anymore at night because I had to take care of him. So the UCF women came calling in 2002. In the summer, I started coaching sevens for them, and I've been there ever since. And that's sort of what the synopsis is. So
awesome. Yeah, we'll get into further detail with you when we do your own episode. Right. But one of the Florida rugby legends is not everybody gets up to Central Florida, and again, the women I know don't come down here as much as they used to. Hopefully, that'll be changing next year with FAU coming back, and hopefully UM. What do you remember about Kris starting out? What are your first memories of Kris as a rugby player?
She was a pretty shy, skinny girl that had ultimate speed, very humble, but the work ethics were unbelievable. Like she said, she went to school, worked 3 jobs, and got to practice. And she told me one time, Raoul, I don't know if I can do this. I said, listen, you just get there. We'll take care of it. So we worked it out. We got her to a camp when she was under 20s. She was reluctant, didn't want to go at first. I said, you got to go. You got speed. You got to use it. And then I think we were in Annapolis, right, Kris, when Martha Danes contacted you about moving on? Yeah. Was it not where we were?
Yeah, that was Annapolis.
Right, yes. And she got invited to move on, and that's when she hit it. And it was, she really only played 2 years for UCF because she started going to these camps and playing for the Eagles and the Sevens. So I really didn't coach her that much. I think I did instill one thing into her. You got to ruck to win. That's about the only thing she get out of me.
Well, that's true for sevens and 15s, no doubt. Now, was she someone that impressed you immediately? Did you know right away that she could be somebody, or was it just obviously natural speed is something you can't teach? But there's obviously speedy people that don't ever get the game. We try to convert football players to rugby players. That doesn't always work. But just something you obviously saw something in her from the start.
I just the speed, but her work ethic. Any person's gonna put that much time into going to school and working 3 jobs and then still making effort to play rugby. You knew that she had something great to move on with. And she had the natural athletic ability. She understood sports. She understood the flow of the game. So it was nice,
And you said speed and work ethic. Right. 2 of the things that you can't teach. Obviously, her parents play a big part in that work ethic side of things. Right. I'm sure you've seen players come through your programs that had, or perhaps the natural athletic ability, but just didn't have that sort of extra grit and that extra work ethic to really take it to the next level.
Yes, sir.
Now,
quite a number of them. We've sent some out to visit Kris, and they sort of bombed on us, didn't they, buddy?
Yeah, listen, it takes a different level of attitude to get to the level that Kris has done. Right. Now, let's talk about your UCF program. Both the men's and women's have had such massive success over the last couple of decades. Why has UCF been, your program in particular on the women's side of things, been just so successful? Obviously, other than you, perhaps, but why has UCF been such a I don't
really think I'm an exceptionally good coach, personally. I think I'll be honest with you. I got asked to go there, and they recruited, and there's a few girls that came along, and they built the program, and they just said, "Listen, we don't want friends to play rugby. We want athletes." And I've been lucky enough to get some really good athletes, and we've coached them up the best I can. I have a very little bit of philosophy on how to coach, and I've just been really lucky. I mean, like Kris showed up out of the blue, and we just got her moving, and that's how it all happens. They all did. I mean, Courtney and Jessica and Javon, and I don't know, the names go on, but they show up. You get a chance to make them better, believe in themselves, and I think that's what your goal is.
Yeah, I mean, UCF made a name for itself. Do you get kids coming to UCF because of rugby? What sort of percentage of kids do you get coming to UCF to play rugby these days?
You're probably not going to want to hear this, Ross. I have recently got some, but in the history of me coaching at UCF, I've only really had about 5 girls that ever played rugby before. And I almost prefer them not playing rugby because some of the coaches in high school are not like what I want. They don't teach rucking and they want them all. So it's really caustic to the program at times. So a raw bone person like Kris came out is to me a better person for me to coach than a person that's played before.
I can see that. Yeah, I mean, the coaching, I think, in the rugby community, I think the concern about the number of coaches available and perhaps the quality of coaches, hopefully the education gets back going. With USA Rugby obviously going through what they're going through, but I think having a lot more qualified coaches and whether it's online, I know they've been working on some online stuff for education as well. But Kris, as you mentioned before, talk about the importance of the coaching that you received. You mentioned it earlier, and how that's really played a part in you getting to this level.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, working with Raoul in particular, like he is all about the physicality. So I left Florida really knowing how to ruck and really knowing how to tackle. And that really, I want to say gave me a leg up when I was going into like the national team camps, because it was like I don't want to say my defense was like good, but it was definitely like solid enough to, hang with the big dogs. And then other coaches along the way.
Especially you mentioned the representative level. I mean, that's what you get. I think that's the big thing about making those representative teams is the level of coaching that you get compared to perhaps a club side. Talk some of the representative coaches that you had, through your sort of U20s, U23s, and the 15s now as well.
I work with Martha Daines. She was like a huge asset for me, helping me out like when I first started playing. And Brandon Sparks, he also was like one of the U23 camps. Sue, like they all were just, I kind of just tried to take like everything that I could from them. Like I don't remember like who told me exactly what, along the way, or I do for some, but not all of it. And then, but just like I just tried to take something from everyone. And then when I got to, the sevens program, Rick Suggett was the head coach at that point. So he taught me so much. He would just like yell at me all the time, and it was good. I could take it. And he just was always giving me like constructive feedback so that I would get like better and better over time.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned Brandon Sparks. He's one of those American names that you hear as one of the potential coaching stars of the future. Now with the Utah Warriors in MLR. And I think he's going to make a big difference with that program. Utah, with the amount of natural talent there and the scouting system they have. Utah are one of those teams to watch in MLR. And yeah, under the guise of Brandon Sparks, I think is the GM there now, not the actual coach. Obviously, Chris Latham, former Australian legend, now coaching there. But yeah, Brandon Sparks, a name to keep an eye on, along with obviously Scott Lawrence at Rugby ATL. Well, Kris and Raoul, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this evening. I hope everybody learned something from these two rugby legends, I'm going to say. Kris Thomas, definitely on our way to being a legend, a legendary Florida product. There's no doubt about it. And Raoul, as you said yourself, been around since the beginning of Florida rugby, basically. We hope to talk to you on your own episode down the road. Charlie, you have any last words for these two?
No, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll have Raoul back later in the season. So
yeah, thanks for the videos you're putting in there. Yeah, again, thanks to our sponsor, Chris Ream, and his. We got a last minute question from Chris Ream. Kris to Kris, talking about Penn Mutual. We mentioned them. What an awesome supporter of rugby they've been over the last few years. You were a spokesperson, I should say, for Penn Mutual. Kris, how was that experience in working with that company?
That was amazing. I'm still in contact with some of them to this day. From the very beginning, like Penn Mutual came in and they were just all about rugby. Like I've never met a company that was just like so about rugby. They just really love it, and they love like the lessons that rugby teaches people, and they hire lots of rugby players. They have internships for lots of rugby players. So I can say nothing but good things about them. It was just a really good experience, and they were just awesome to work with. And what I thought was cool, sometimes companies come in and they only sponsor a male athlete, but for them, they wanted everything to be 50-50. They wanted everything to be equal. So they took myself and Madison, and I thought that was really testament to their company and their values. So it was a great experience working with them.
We need to bring them on board then, Ross.
Was that I need to bring Penn Mutual on board?
Yeah.
Listen, I think at this time in the world with the pandemic, listen, I hope they continue to support rugby after all this. Obviously, the big sponsor of the CRCs, which we didn't have this season, but I know they've been a big help to plenty of teams down here in Florida with whether it's providing jerseys or providing post pads. Penn Mutual's done an awesome job. And again, if you're looking for life insurance, Kris Ream can help you out and get you sorted out with Penn Mutual at lifeinsuranceguy.com. So check him out again. Thanks to Kris for helping out. Thanks to both Chris's, Kris for coming on and joining us this evening, and obviously Raoul. You can, if you didn't catch this live, you can check the replay out anytime on YouTube, rugbyfl.com/TFRO, and the podcast will be available on all major podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, rugbyfl.com. Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and any of the major podcast suppliers. So appreciate you joining us this evening again. Thanks to Kris and to Raoul for joining us. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll see you next Sunday. We're not going to spoil our guests for that just yet, but we'll see you next Sunday, same time, same place, 7:30 for the next episode of Talking Florida Rugby Occasionally. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.